We are we're the product of an intentional act, and we were imbued with a force that was greater even than those who created us. And there has been an effort from that time to deny us that force.
Well, how do you know that our force is greater than those that created us?
I don't know this.
Where are you getting that from?
That is from, if you're familiar with the Gnostic texts. In the Gnostic texts, the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in 1946-47, the oldest unedited records of the Old Testament. Push the date back 1,000 years. In 45 and 46, the oldest records of the New Testament and the texts that were excluded were discovered in a little village along the Nile in Egypt called Nag Hammadi. Can I just tell? It's a crazy story.
Sure.
There's not much firewood along the Nile in Egypt, and there was a woman who needed kindling to feed her family, to build the fires, to feed her family and heat their home. And she told her son, go find some kindling, and he was very resourceful. There's no trees, so he found an old tomb. And in the tomb were clay vases, and he opened those vases, and there were documents that were very dry and brittle and made great kindling.
Oh, no.
And we don't know how many were lost before the authorities were noted, but right now there are 13 bound.
They cooked a bunch of them?
They burned, they used them for fuel.
Oh my God.
Here's what's left. What's left, there were 13 bound books representing over 50 texts. They were the oldest records of the New Testament, and they were the records that were excluded by the Catholic Church.
Is there any images of these books?
Yeah. So there's the 13 bound texts. So among these were things like the Gospel of Thomas, which is considered the second most heretical book in the Nag Hammadi library. There's the Gospel of John, also called the Secret Book of John, also called the Apocryphon of John, which is considered the first most heretical book. There are books from Gnostic women. Thunder Perfect Mind is a book by a Gnostic woman that's in there. The Gospel of James is in there. But the Gospel of Thomas is one of probably the most controversial. It's 114 sayings that were recorded by Thomas, and the book says Didymus Thomas. It was the name, and it's almost like it's different from all the other books in that each saying is a teaching unto itself. What he was teaching was so profound for his time. There were outer teachings and inner teachings. The outer teachings were for the masses, and it's primarily what you see in the Gospels. The inner teachings were for those initiates that could really understand what it was he was saying, and that's what the Gospel of Thomas appears to be. It did come from a later time. I don't think it invalidates that, what it is that is being said in there.
What is being said that's so controversial?
Well, there's 114 sayings in there, but the bottom line, and this is one I think that is probably one of the most well-known, where he says, what you bring forth from within you will save you, and what you don't bring forth from within you will destroy you. He's saying there's a power inside of us that has to be expressed. And these texts are all about how we awaken that power. Okay, so the name, I'm going to use a word and then I'll define it. The name that is given to that power traditionally is called divinity, but it has nothing to do with religion. So that association is made because there are schools of divinity that make that, and they're great schools. They do great things. But the contemporary definition of divinity, I love this, the ability to transcend perceived limitations. And that's it. So the ability to transcend, to become more than perceived. Joe, you and I, our listeners, we are living limits that probably aren't even real. We're living within limits that we have been indoctrinated to accept about ourselves. Divinity is our ability to become the best version of ourselves. Expressions of divinity, imagination. I mean, no other form of life can do what we do with imagination. And I want to talk about that in just a moment. It's more than just a picture in your mind. And an image in the mind is setting into motion a cascade of chemical effects in the human body that literally change us. We are changed in the presence of the right kind of imagination, and the books tell us how to do that. So imagination, creativity, innovation, empathy, sympathy, love, compassion, healing, forgiveness. These are expressions of human divinity. It's what sets us apart from all other forms of life. It makes us such powerful beings. The purpose of evil, and this might be the most important thing that we say today, because it's a nebulous concept, good and evil, until you give it a benchmark. The purpose of evil is to deny human divinity. The purpose of evil is to deny us our greatest expressions: imagination, creativity, the ability to communicate and share our ideas, empathy, sympathy, self-healing, all of those things. So in a very real sense, Joe, anything that denies those things is an expression of evil. To communicate our ideas from this perspective, that's an expression of evil. When we put something into our bodies that prevents us from healing our own bodies, that is an expression of evil. What the Gnostic texts are saying is that we are in a process that has a beginning and an end. And the purpose of the process is to deny humankind our own humanness. That has been playing out over eons, and now the technology is allowing it to play out to a greater degree, because things like AI, things like misused, I'm not anti-AI, it's how it's used. Things like computer chips in the brain, computer-brain interface, all of these things, what they're doing, Joe, is they are denying our humanness. Use it or lose it. If we're using technology in place of our imagination, for example, and the psychology journals are full of articles about this, people that chronically use artists, musicians. My wife is a voting member of the Grammys, and we just had this conversation. You've got musicians who go to ChatGPT and say, hey, write me a song, and now put some music to that song, and now you enter it with the Grammys, and you are competing against a human who has labored 30 or so years to master their voice and an instrument, and you say, is that fair? Well, they're struggling with that right now. But so these are all expressions of anything that denies our humanness. From that perspective, is an expression of evil. Who is doing that? That is what those texts are all about. That's what the texts are talking to us about.